there's trouble, G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there. It's G.I. Joe against Cobra, the enemy, fighting to save the day. He never gives up, he's always there, fighting for freedom over land and air. G.I. Joe, G.I. Joe is there.
G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
He never gives up, he'll stay till the fight's won. G.I. Joe will dare. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to the... Oh, am I recording yet? Okay, sorry. Welcome back to the Project Gen X podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Alan Smith, along with...
I'm Barry!
Hi. And this week, Dave is not with us, but we do have a special guest because of the topic and also because we did not meet our quota of middle-aged bald guys with facial hair. So, would you please introduce yourself to the audience?
My name is Michael Midget, and Midget is legitimately my last name, and I am 6 feet tall, so it's awesome.
Yeah. And got a huge truck he pulled up in.
Yes.
All right, well, there you go. So it's
nice.
But I brought Michael on because a new friend that works at The Great Escape. We've talked about The Great Escape on here many times over the last 3 years of doing this show. And also the fact that we have the same tattoo.
Yes. yeah. Left arm is G.I. Joe.
Exactly. And you also, what was it? You moderate the toy collecting and the G.I. Joe here?
I'm one of the original two admins for the G.I. Joe Nashville Traders Group.
Nice.
So therefore,
in case you haven't figured it out, what our topic today is
it's going to be on G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Because, he'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. So,
Knowing is half the battle.
That's
the
right.
other half is red and blue lasers.
Absolutely. So,
there you go.
Oh, man.
Nobody dying on screen.
Yeah, no joke. There is so much to unpack with this. But from our childhoods especially. But Barry's going to start us off talking about the actual history because G.I. Joe goes back to, the 60s, somewhere in there. I know...
64.
1964. The whole trope of, the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip, I had older cousins who had some of the bigger doll-sized G.I. Joes. I know they're quote-unquote action figures, but they're as big as Barbie. So it's kind of one of those So Barry, if you want to go ahead and give us a little rundown on that, and then we'll do commentary.
So G.I. Joe was originally invented by a gentleman by the name of Donald Levine. That's what's considered the founder of it. It started back in 1967. The original idea was trying to develop essentially kind of an answer to Barbie. Mm-hmm. They wanted a doll that would attract an action figure.
Yes. Not a doll. Don't action figure.
Don't commit blasphemy.
Yes. Fair. They're two large bald men that'll hurt me if I make that statement again. So, but
I'm happy that you put me in the large category, considering my height and everything. So.
Yeah, and I'm a midget, so hey.
So the original idea was created by a gentleman by the name of Stanley Weston. He was a licensing agent from Manhattan back in '63. And he had made a couple of different prototypes as far as the designs and trying to get the general idea. Donald Levine takes credit for it. He actually worked for a company called Hasbro.
Mm-hmm.
And when he marketed it over to him, he literally sold the rights for $100,000.
Oh.
Now, this is in '63. So
that seemed like a lot of money.
Yeah,
it was a lot of money back then. So let's see.
They originally marketed...
Go ahead.
Okay. They originally marketed this, the catchphrase. I'll throw our first question, Michael. Do you remember what the original catchphrase was for G.I. Joe?
I will be perfectly honest. I do not.
He was America's movable fighting man.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
Yes, very much.
Bad. And honestly, it had some limited success between like 64 and 69. That's really the birth of that. When they initially came out with it, this was actually the first thing to develop a quote-unquote action figure. They specifically did not use the word doll anywhere in the marketing of it for that very reason. They wanted to market it towards boys. And when they went through the trademarking on this, Hasbro did actually trademark the phrase America's Movable Fighting Man. When they originally came out, there was only a handful of different characters. There was Rocky, who was the Marine, Skip, who was the sailor, Ace was the pilot. It was just the three.
Okay.
You're going to love this. In 2003, one of the original prototypes sold for over $200,000.
Wow.
Just one.
Just for the prototype.
No, I'm surprised it wasn't more.
I can't. That's still a lot of money, but still, that's crazy.
Now, in 65, they added an African American character, but basically all they did was take the character and paint it.
Yeah, that's it.
So and again, there was a lot of things that kind of developed on this as they went forward. They knew that they had lightning in a bottle on this.
Okay.
So as they started to develop it, they eventually moved it over to something called Adventure Team, which just so happened to be right around 1970. Which, if your history serves, we were right in the middle of the Vietnam War. And then they started doing something called The Adventures of G.I. Joe, which they wanted it to be like America's team. They wanted to really kind of give that shot in the arm for the military movement, and that's where it came up. And they even tried to make them more quote unquote lifelike.
Furry hair.
And I'm sure if you've seen these, when they had the flocked hair and the flocked beard and all of these.
Those things are really nice now when you run into them because they're missing like big chunks of hair and everything.
Yeah, from where people have rubbed them off.
Yeah, I'm sure you didn't mean it that way, but
pun intended.
You rubbed off your GI Joe. Yeah, okay.
I think we just came up with a new euphemism. I'm not sure.
So that's the whole thing with the Kung Fu grip.
But,
so come on,
so speaking of which, that was developed in 1974, was when they first came up with the Kung Fu grip. And that was really a major transition. They actually stole that from another product that was big in England called Action Man.
Okay.
Action Man was developed right around, I think, 1970. And they retooled a lot of those ideas that they used in that for G.I. Joe starting in about 74. In 76, they gave it something called Eagle Eye Vision, which was actually kind of cool.
Is that the one where you could look through the back?
Yeah, where you could look through the back of the head and it looked like would zoom stuff in.
I know they did that same thing with the $6 Million Man,
Yes.
like some of his stuff. So.
Yeah. They've had multiple different designs on this, but that was what G.I. Joe was known for up until about maybe 76, 77. It wasn't until 1982 when you had the new catchphrase that was developed, and they had reduced the size of the action figure from 12-inch to 3 3/4. Mm-hmm. And that's when you had the phrase G.I. Joe, a real American hero.
Yep.
That's when that was first developed.
And we can thank
Still
Star
working
Wars.
through Hasbro.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because Kenner with those Star Wars figures. Yeah.
Because the Star Wars ones were made by Kenner.
Right.
And they were actually at 3 inches. So when Hasbro decided they wanted to do theirs, they wanted theirs more detailed and they wanted those bigger. So that's why they made them 3 3/4 inches.
Fair enough.
And that's when you start to get the development of what became what we know as G.I. Joe now.
Yes. What we grew up with.
Exactly. And the heyday of G.I. Joe was early to mid 80s into the 90s. That's when it just exploded.
We'll get into that because I know towards the very end of the 80s, right, especially in the early 90s, is when G.I. Joe really took a downturn.
Yeah.
Quick note here, $100,000 in 1963 and 2002 would be $980,000. So that's still
basically $1 million.
Yeah. That's still, especially considering what he sold it for and the royalties that would have come off of 50 years of stuff. It just really 60 years at this point. So.
Oh yeah.
All right. Let's talk about our era of G.I. Joe because that's what we're really
Bring
here
it
for.
on.
So.
Bring it on.
Which one? All right, before we talk, we're going to break this down into cartoon, comic book, and action figures. I'm sure we'll get into some other stuff because there are plenty of others. You know, there's the movie and there's all kinds of other stuff that goes with it. But which one do you guys want to start with? All right, let's see.
Let's go ahead and start with the action figures.
We'll start with the action figure. Okay,
we're already talking about
it.
It's pretty much where we were all introduced to it to begin with.
Were they
Yeah, agreed.
first, or was the comic book first, or were they introduced at the same time? I want to say they were right around
Well,
the same
it
time
depends.
somewhere.
It depends, because if you really want to go technical, G.I. Joe comic book was originally based off of a comic strip from the 1940s.
Okay.
It was called Private Breger.
Okay.
They didn't develop the actual comic books. They licensed it back in '67
Okay.
to start developing the comic
But they
books.
didn't get there
They didn't really
until
take off to the
82.
mid '80s though,
Yeah.
so they were right around the same time.
Hey, Michael, can you hand me that? I've got my G.I. Joe #1.
I was
right up
actually
there.
looking it
Yeah,
up.
Go grab that real quick. That's actually probably easier just to kind of look at it and see what the date on it is.
And can I just say for a moment that it's kind of weird for me to talk about the history of comic book stuffs with a guy in the room that actually works for a comic book store. It's a little awkward. I'm not gonna lie.
It is what it is. Like I said, and of course,
It's like he's just waiting to call me out on my shit.
No, you're good. You're good.
I have been reading comics since shortly after this was released.
The
This
comic
says
shop is simply a second job.
Yeah.
I'm a foreman for a pipe fitting company, so I do construction on the daily.
this on the inside.
Oh, admit
says,
it. Working for the comic book store is a means to an end for
Yeah,
you. It's
pretty
to
much,
Fit to fit the addiction.
It's a sanity and a decompression type job. It's something I do that I enjoy, and it's not a job.
Let's see. This is #1, June 1982. That may or may not be true, because a lot of times what they say the actual publication date is usually a month or two either ahead of or behind, depending on what comic
To
books.
keep in perspective, they market issues 3 months in advance of them
Yes.
being released. So
Now-
I guess it's a fair estimate.
One of the things with this I remember in 82 was seeing commercials for the comic book.
Yes.
Like, and you can go on YouTube and look them up, and they had these little 30-second commercials. They were animated, and at the end of it would show a copy of the issue. Go pick up G.I. Joe issue, whatever, on sale, newsstands now, type stuff.
If I am correct, using another 80s toy line as a starting point, I want to say the toys came first.
Probably.
And the reason I say that is because Masters of the Universe changed the way...
He-Man theory.
Yes.
It
Yes.
changed the way that toys, cartoons, and comic books interacted with each other. Because essentially, the Masters of the Universe cartoon was a giant commercial.
Absolutely.
And the government was like, nope, you can't do that.
Right. And then they had to put all those little, and now type stuff on the
Exactly.
end of them.
So I would say it's. I want to say the toys came out just before the comic,
Probably.
and because the comic was where Larry Hama used to. He fleshed out the characters themselves that the toys were being based on.
And there's some great, and we'll get to the comic book in a minute. Let's start with the comic. There were the original. Was it the original 9? Is that what it was? It was Grunt, Roadblock.
No,
Not Roadblock.
Well,
I'm sorry.
in the
Rock
comics,
and Roll.
yes.
Excuse me. It was Grunt, Rock and Roll,
Zap.
Zap. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head, and I'm not doing it.
Hawk was one, but he wasn't a general at the time.
Right.
You had.
There was
Snake Eyes.
Snake Eyes was one of them. Scarlet was one of them.
Yeah,
There were no Cobra at this point. It was all
No.
G.I. Joes that were released initially. I'm trying to remember everybody in the middle. And then you remember where Cobra was introduced, correctly?
So
the figures, how they were introduced initially.
They were introduced with a total of 4 figures in the 82 wave.
Okay.
Blood he was a mail away offered in the 82 figures.
Okay.
He was available
remember
carded
that.
in 83.
Correct, yes.
He is the only figure considered in the original 82 release to have both a straight arm and a swivel arm because one of his arms was
right
completely
arm.
fixed.
His right
no
arm
elbow
with the gun.
joint.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
No elbow joint.
I know because I've got him around here somewhere.
But his other arm did have the swivel arm,
Yes.
regardless of when you got him, whether it was the 82 or the 83
Correct.
when it was on card.
Well, what I was getting with
the Missile Command Center.
There you go. That's what I was getting to.
But they were also available as mail-aways through JCPenney.
Yes.
And that's actually individually, but that's where the Missile Command Center was
it Penny or was it Sears?
JCPenney.
It was Penny? Okay. I knew it was
if I
one
remember
of the two.
correctly. No, I am incorrect on that. It was Sears.
It was Sears, yeah. That's what
The Missile Command Center, I want to say, was a Sears exclusive.
It was. It came with 3 figures. It came with Cobra Commander,
Yes.
a Cobra Officer, and a Cobra...
just Cobra.
just a Cobra Trooper. Mm-hmm. I looked, they're here somewhere, okay? And I know you're going to like freak out if I find them and show them to you. 10 years ago when I was doing the flea market, I bought a bunch of stuff and I was digging through, and in the very bottom of the box, I pulled out all 3 of the file cards uncut. They are perfect.
Wow. I processed. So here's the cool thing about me working for the Great Escape. I am the toy buyer for the location not too far from where we're at right now. And I just, for nostalgia purposes, I love doing it. I love seeing the stuff that I had as a kid and getting to piece it together. And we had a gentleman bring in his childhood toy collection. And it had been sitting in his parents' house, and it was 2 boxes worth. And I didn't hear what he said was in there at first,
right?
Because I was in the middle of processing another buy. And as I started to thumb through the first box, I see vintage Kenner Star Wars. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And, I love the original trilogy. The New Hope.
We won't talk about any of the rest of it.
Yeah,
they don't exist.
But I wasn't big on the toys.
Right.
I love the movies. And as I kept going through it, I start seeing some G.I. Joes. I'm like, oh, cool. This guy's got some vintage shows. We did end up purchasing the collection, and as I started actually going through, he is 1 figure short of having the entire 1982/83 release of the original figures.
Wow.
Yeah. The Cobra Trooper was the only one missing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He did have a swivel arm Cobra Commander.
Yeah.
However, all the others were the original straight arms.
Right.
And with the exception of 3, they were unbroken.
Nice.
Yes.
Which is really unusual.
Yes.
Because we all experienced that back in the day.
So, of course, the broken ones were Snake Eyes. Both his hands were broken.
Oh, that sucks.
Rock and Roll had his one thumb broken. And other than that, as far as the accessories go, the only ones missing anything were Rock and Roll missing his tripod off of his gun.
Right.
And then the ones that came with the helmets and the visors was the only
visor is usually missing.
Otherwise, they're
Those
complete.
things were always gone.
I have a straight arm Rock and Roll complete somewhere here,
man.
as well as a few other. I've got you looking for a set of legs from my Cobra Commander, which is the straight arm, which are unbroken as well.
Now, here's the thing: is it Mickey Mouse or is it the corrected actual Cobra logo?
I would have to go and look at it. I don't have
the
it.
Mickey Mouse.
I'll
Cobra
find it.
Commander.
I'll find it after we're done here.
The original release of the Sears, the Missile Command Center was
right.
It was just something wrong with the application process, and it came out looking like Mickey Mouse. And it was, from there, it was just, it became one of those mythical toys that, people talked about having, and you never saw one until you got older, and now you start seeing them, and it's pretty cool.
I do know that the one that I
didn't even know
have
about
is
that.
not in the best of shape, but it's pretty good for being 40 years old, I have a really nice second Snake Eyes. I had one of the original design of Snake Eyes a few years ago that was in really good shape, but it was the swivel arm rather than the straight, and I think I sold it in some stuff at one point.
You would think that the original 82 Snake Eyes would be one of the more sought after figures. How the 30 different versions of Snake Eyes that we have out of the entire run, but the 85 is the most desirable Snake Eyes, the one that came with Timber. And
I was about to say that's the one that came with Timber. I
have
remember that.
I have Timber also.
Because that would have came out right after the first movie too, wouldn't it?
It came out
what they called G.I. Joe the movie.
No, that it actually came out before that.
No, that was 87. That was 87. I'm sorry.
What happened is that and we'll get into this. The cartoon was released in the fall of '83.
Yes,
the original miniseries, The Mass Device. And I still I have the DVD that they put out for the 20th anniversary.
Yeah,
back in '03 that has the Mass Device and the Weather Dominator. Those two,
and the cartoon accurate Snake Eyes.
Yes, exactly. Okay, we'll get into the reaction figures here in a little bit. Okay, because there's some really cool stuff with that. But when they came back for when they came out for the next year with the Weather Dominator, that's when they released that second Snake Eyes. The second version of him, because again they had introduced Timber in the first in '83. If I'm telling this correctly, you probably know this better. I know it was in like a second or third wave of the. I
want to say '84 was when the cartoon started releasing, because Duke, and that was when we had the.
Well, that's what I'm saying. With this, the first one. Like I said, the weather or the Mass Device, which is actually just called A Real American Hero or whatever. Sorry, I'm looking through my stuff here. I think it was released in '83, and then the next year was when they released the one about with the Weather Dominator, which led into the cartoon.
83, 84. Yeah. And actually the first two miniseries actually are the bulk of season one of the Sunbow series.
They're the best of all of it, let's be honest.
We're not going to really give a lot of credence to the Peak series unless it's the original miniseries.
Those two miniseries are great. The cartoon itself. And even as a child, I remember watching the show and being upset at the fact of there was such a lack of continuity. Things would happen. I'm like, hey, there was an episode earlier where that would fix this, and they just acted like it didn't exist, And
yeah. To your point, Alan, just kind of what throwing back to one of our more recent episodes about Firefly. That was the most frustrating thing about G.I. Joe, is that when it would show on whatever your local television channel was, there was never any continuity.
None
to
whatsoever.
Episodes correct. And oftentimes they would even jump from series to series. You get the first series, the second series, and you bounce back and forth on it. So you'd have characters on one that didn't exist in the one that you're going to watch next week.
I remember there was an episode where the flag sank. The aircraft carrier.
Man, it's been so long since I watched
I remember this, but it was like the next season or something, they actually made mention of that, and they actually had to go down to the wreckage to get something. I was like, oh, wow, they're actually acknowledging that something happened in the past, But that's that, and whenever there was that story about the communications guy. I can't remember his name.
Breaker.
Was it Breaker? No, it was the second
Breaker or
one.
Mainframe?
Mainframe. It was Mainframe and Zorana
yes.
had a romance on the show, and there was a callback to that later. That it was like, oh wow, those are the only two things I ever remember them actually having callbacks to stuff that happened previously in the show. So,
well, and they actually did that again with Shipwreck too. They had one with him. I remember that distinctly.
The Synthoid episode.
He had an entire episode that was dedicated to just him. And a throwback to it.
And then there was that weird where they went into the future. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I think that was on the second version of the cartoon, where Shipwreck went into the future. And so did Mainframe, and there was somebody else, and it was one of those things where it was a dystopian future where it was an alternate universe.
It was an alternate reality.
Yes, that's what
Clutch it was. And I want to say Breaker actually stayed behind because their versions had died already.
Yes,
so they stayed behind, and essentially retconned them out of the show, as a way to introduce new characters.
Yes, which was what Transformers the movie did, except they just straight up killed everybody. Again, you get into the G.I. Joe the movie, and they Duke was supposed to die in that movie, and they had such backlash about Optimus and several other people dying, and they were like, okay, so we're going to do this voiceover. Hey, Duke's all right. Yay.
It wasn't because of the backlash. It was because they had actually released the Transformers animated movie before G.I. Joe, although G.I. Joe was animated first.
Right. I know that it sat on the shelf for a while.
And so they did not want to be accused of copying the plot of killing the leader to replace him with another leader. So they were like, oh man, we got to change it. And so, that, and then fast forward to, the 2000s when we finally got a live action G.I. Joe crap fest.
Right.
And
we won't even talk about that.
Well,
we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll get to that. Okay?
We'll say that history repeated itself where they were like, we're going to kill Duke off.
Yeah, I know. Let's move back to the toys real quick.
Okay.
I have a few sitting over here.
Yes.
I was showing Michael. I have a Hiss tank, and I know you're looking at that Vamp over there.
The Vamp Mark I.
That Vamp is my actual one that I got in '83, whenever it was that it was released.
With working turrets.
Working turrets, yes.
Yes.
And I know it's not sitting there, but I have the gas cans and all the accessories to it, and the steering wheel. That right there was that was one of the first vehicles that they introduced. There was that, and there was the Wolverine, and there was
flat cannon.
Yes, the flat, yeah. And so I remember getting that at Hill's department store, and I've had it ever since. I had, like I was telling him before we got on here, I've talked about this on the show before. When I was an only child, and so I had Christmases that were like, this is my Transformers Christmas. This is my Star Wars Christmas. There was a Inhumanoid / Sectors Christmas, I had I legitimately got tons and tons of stuff because I was a spoiled kid. I will say it straight up, okay? And my kid's exactly the same one. I had a G.I. Joe Christmas also in '84 or something like that. I'm not saying this is not my brag. I'm just this is just the childhood that I grew up with. And so I legitimately had most of the G.I. Joe stuff when I was a kid. My kind of white whale that I never owned was the Cobra Rattler. That was about the only one that I really wanted that I never got.
Mine was the Raven. So when I got
that
older,
was later, right?
Yes.
That was the stealth stuff.
As I got older, and I was like, you know what? I never was able to own one as a child. Guess what? I'm going to army build the Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in time, I had a total of 9, with 4 of them being complete.
Nice.
And then I was like, you know what? For work, I'm moving to Memphis. I really can't take my entire collection with me, so I sold it off. And about 3 months after I sold my collection, the boom hit, and I was like, dang.
That was kind of back in 2001.
Yes.
My eBay was kind of at its height, and I started going through my attic and pulling down all my old toys. I mean, all my Masters of the Universe, all my Star Wars, all my G.I. Joe, Inhumanoids and Sectors, all of that stuff. And I wound up selling, and I did really well, okay? Especially for at the time, but it's one of those things that as time went on, I was like, I really wish I hadn't got rid of all that stuff.
Well, and I've got a question for the two of you here.
Sure.
Because I'm really kind of curious on this, because this is something that, you talked about your experiences with it. Michael talked about his. One distinct memory that I have on this was my dad, when he was a kid, used to the G.I. Joe 12-inch.
Yes.
So when they reintroduced it in the 80s for the 3 3/4, that was kind of a bond between the two of us, because he remembered having those 12-inch action figures that I did it intentional. Yeah. But he remembered having those 12-inch action figures when he was a kid. So when he saw this new incarnation, that's something he kind of, revisited his childhood through my eyes of going through this. And boy, did he open up the floodgates on that, because just like you,
right.
And that was the cool thing about those, is that they were reasonably priced for kids. They weren't something that was
No.
ridiculously priced.
They
for the
were
figures.
about $3,
$2 to $3.
$2 to $3. Yeah, I remember like getting $10 one time and like how many GI Joe figures can I get for this?
Even
It's
when
like,
they came out with the Sonic fighters in the 90s,
Right. They were still reasonable.
They were still reasonable. I mean, at most you were paying $5, and kids today don't get that, inflation and all. But
there's that phrase, kids today. You kids today, it's their damn loud rock and roll music.
my
And it's
lawn.
like, yeah, exactly.
You talk about you talk about your
Time for
dad.
Matlock yet?
You talk about your dad and everything. My father passed away in April of this year from cancer, and that was actually one of the things when I was a kid. My dad never hesitated if I wanted a toy, or something like that. He wouldn't hesitate to buy it for me.
Right.
GI Joes were the ones that he bought the most, and the cool thing was he made me earn them. I was not spoiled by any means. If I wanted something, I had to earn it. So it was a lot of going and cutting wood and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But it did lead to me being able to bond with my dad in that sense. And, it was not necessarily because he had the toys when he was growing up, but more so, taking the time to work with him. And then him saying, hey, this is your reward for your hard work.
Right.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
So it's something, if I'm ever lucky enough to have children, I will absolutely pass that on.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That Dad was never really into. I mean, when GI Joe would have been big, my dad would have been, or in that era, like that original era, he would have been in his teen years or type stuff. So, so he was never. Of course, he would always talk about, oh yeah, I remember GI Joe from but he was never really big into. My dad's never been big into pop culture. My stretch the imagination.
Slightly off subject, but interesting story about my dad. For the longest time, everybody called my dad Otis, and I never understood why, because my dad's name was Mark Kevin, finally got to ask one of his coworkers, why do you call my dad Otis? Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, you probably don't know, but when your dad was a teenager on up into about his early 20s, he spent a lot of time in jail for fighting and other things. He legitimately had his own cell. So we called him Otis.
Just like in the Griffith show.
I was like, drunk.
Nice. Yeah. So, all right, let me ask this question. So onto the toys. I know I talked about like my white whale,
right.
But what was your favorite? We'll start with you, Michael. What was your favorite action figure? What was your favorite, accessory, whatever, type stuff,
Favorite Joe.
Okay.
Outback.
Okay.
I have the artwork tattooed on my arm.
There you go.
And I have to say, favorite figure would have been Outback. Favorite vehicle, I have to say, if we're going based off obviously something I owned, I'm looking at a version of it. The Tiger Force Vamp.
Oh yeah, I remember
was
Tiger
was
Force
one
stuff.
of my favorites, and I was lucky to own one. I thought that was probably the best version of the Vamp. Was the Tiger Force?
Yeah. Okay, cool. What about you, Barry?
Oh, favorite character, favorite figure.
Mm-hmm.
I love Dusty. I thought Dusty was one of my absolute favorites. It was just kind of a cool concept for it. And that's one thing that G.I. Joe did very, very well, is everybody was specialized.
Yes.
Yes,
they were.
If there was some unique thing about you that you like that didn't exist on one, trust me, there's a Joe that would meet it. Mm-hmm. As far as the vehicle, I really like the hovercraft.
Okay.
And
the whale.
I think that the biggest...
I never had a whale. I'll admit that. I never had that. It's just there was so much stuff on it, It's
yeah. By accident, one year I ended up getting 2 of them from 2 different relatives for Christmas. So
by accident,
we would stack those things out. Yeah, exactly. Well,
I know.
What do you get this kid? You get him something GI Joe. All right. But that was also was it Cutter?
Yes.
Was
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
First GI Joe I ever saw that actually had something as part of the figure that was not G.I. Joe related. He had a Boston Red Sox hat on.
I'm a Red Sox fan, so yes, I appreciate Cutter.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, all right, Alan, what about you?
I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Snake Eyes. I like that original Snake Eyes, and I do like the second version of him also. Anything beyond that, I'm kind of like, yeah.
You don't like paintball Snake Eyes?
No, I really don't. That, for whatever reason, because, again, that goes through when we get into the comics, we'll get into a lot of that here in a minute. But as far as vehicles, it's got to be, I mean, again, I still have my Vamp from 40 years ago, but I also, the reason that I have that Hiss tank is the same thing. I love that design for whatever reason. There's something about it. And I know they had the Crimson Guard version of it later that had the red turret and everything. And it's just like, I like that original all black. There's something sleek and very 80s about it.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, like what you were talking before about the Hiss tank driver has a weird head sculpt. Like the helmet is completely different than anything else. It almost looks like, something out of like Buck Rogers or Battlestar Galactica or something like that, where it's
looks more like a space helmet.
It really does,
something that you're like,
what? But yeah, that stuff, of course, I love the whole Zartan, all of that, with the fact that he would actually change color when you put him out in sunlight, and the costumes
that was so
and all
cool.
that stuff, and
that was so damn cool.
I know, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, but it really does. It comes back to Snake Eyes and even Storm Shadow a little bit. There was something about the relationship between them, which we'll get into. We get in the comics here in just a second, and then of course we get into all the movie and everything. Oh, I know, and there's a whole lot in that. So, but yeah, that's for me. That's like I said, I love the Rattler. It was always kind of my white whale because I just love that whole deal with like how the wings would like turn up, and you could do like the vertical, and everything. It's like, all right, that's really cool. Yeah, but just like I said, that Vamp though is just. I couldn't when I sold all my stuff. I couldn't get rid of that. That was the one thing. I was like, no, I'm hanging on to this. I'm I've got to put a new O-ring in Clutch because he's a little wobbly. He won't stand up on his own any longer. So.
Bring him by the shop one day.
Oh, I've got him in. I've done plenty of those.
So let me ask you guys something on this, because since you brought him up, I'm going to go ahead and I was talking with some friends of mine and let them know that we were going to do an episode on G.I. Joe. And somebody made this comment, and I thought about it for a long time, and there's some validity to it, but I'm curious to get your input. Someone once said to me that Snake Eyes is to G.I. Joe what Wolverine was to the X-Men.
In some ways, yes, I will give you that. I will. That is kind of, Snake Eyes is the character that when you say G.I. Joe, people of a certain age especially will, Snake Eyes. Yeah, there were a lot of other cool people too. It's like, I get it. Yeah, and you're right. Because they've put him in everything. Hell, they gave him his own movie last year, which was actually not bad.
He will be forever remembered when it comes to the G.I. Joe that we're accustomed to, the real American hero.
Yes,
he will forever be the Wolverine. He is the character that you have to have at some point in time, or else people are just going to be like, nope, done.
Yeah, I know. And also
that's your street cred.
Also the fact that there was so much mystery about his background. Same thing with Wolverine. He didn't speak, and and it was just kind of one of the. There was just a lot of mystery around this character, and he was just cool. You couldn't see his face. You didn't know, all that kind of stuff. And that's the whole thing. When we get in, let's go ahead and start talking about the conquest. Larry Hama, wrote the comics all the way through for the for the original Marvel run from issue 1 to, I think it was 159, 158, 159, somewhere around there.
Hama, if I'm not mistaken, wrote the entire original run.
Yes.
And when Marvel canceled the book, he was very upset with
it.
And
because they did it just abruptly. It was like, oh yeah, and by the way, we're canceling this comic.
Right. It was 155.
155. I knew it was in the 150s somewhere, yeah.
December 1994.
Yep.
And it pretty much the cancellation coincided with the end of the toy line.
Yes.
At which point they were, Marvel and Hasbro were working pretty much hand in hand on it. Marvel produced the cartoon. Sunbow was
Marvel
the
Studio.
animation division of Marvel Comics, and so they were all tied together. But they still, the comics were very geared towards more mature themes.
Absolutely. People died.
Right.
There were characters
They
who died.
I mean,
yeah.
Larry Hama created Battle Force 2000. They wanted to do a toy subset, but Hama was like, you know what? I'm creating these characters to kill them.
Right.
They made one appearance, and they died.
Well-
and thankfully, because DJ was killed in his only appearance in the comics, and that
really
makes me
hate that
happy.
character.
Yes, I absolutely hate that character.
One of the for those of us who read the comic books, one of the iconic deaths was Quinn.
Yes.
Who was never officially a part of G.I. Joe, but he was, he worked with them. And when they killed him, and it was early in the run too.
Quinn the Eskimo.
Yeah, but I mean, literally, like within the first 20 episodes, first 20 issues, they killed him, and it was like, no, he's gone. That was one of the things when the reaction figures came out a few years ago. They finally got a Quinn action figure.
We did
all of
get a Quinn G.I. Joe O-ring figure.
Oh, really?
In the 3-packs that they came out with. Now, they were slightly modified, newer head sculpts, so the heads were smaller.
This is newer, though.
Yes,
okay.
but it is an O-ring, a vintage O-ring style.
Okay.
So the body is comprised of the original design.
Awesome.
And so we did get one, but that was also from the same toy line where we got a 3-pack of Snake Eyes before he was Snake Eyes.
Right.
So he was in his military fatigues from Vietnam, along with Tommy
cool.
Arashikage.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to... Probably the quintessential G.I. Joe comic book of all time is issue 21, Silent Interlude. The setup is that Scarlet had been kidnapped and she was in the Cobra Citadel, and Snake Eyes went in on a lone mission to rescue her. It's called Silent Interlude because there is no dialogue whatsoever. It's all told visually.
Yes.
The very last page of the book, as Snake Eyes is getting back on the the Cobra, whatever their glider was called, and she's on there with him, shows Snake Eyes has a tear in his costume, and you can see a tattoo. And in the very next panel, Storm Shadow is standing there, and you can see the same tattoo on his forearm where where his wrap had come undone. That blew my mind when I was a kid of like, what's going on here? And I said at that point, as an 11 or 12-year-old, however, I guess it was about 11 when I saw when that came out, I was like, if I ever get a tattoo, it wasn't my first tattoo, but it was one that eventually I did wind up getting in the same placement. And what was funny is that last year when that Snake Eyes movie was released, I was walking through the theater and got stopped multiple times. People were like, matter of fact, not 2 weeks ago, I was sitting at Waffle House up near the counter, and a guy come walking by and goes, "Hey, dude," he's like, you got a Storm Shadow tattoo?" And I was like, "Snake Eyes, yeah," but so he's like, "That's cool."
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I know you have.
I got mine.
Thing.
I got mine in the non-traditional area.
Right,
The majority of people do get it on the forearm,
right?
Because that's where they put it.
Exactly.
I put mine on right smack dab in between my bicep and my tricep on my arm. So,
but you also have the Cobra logo.
Yes, I have the Cobra logo on my shoulder as well. So.
And that, again, with that whole thing, CM Punk has the Cobra logo, and he has a version of this tattoo. It's not quite the same. It's not filled in. It's just kind of the outlines and everything. But, of course, he also has a Pepsi logo on the other shoulder. So it's
he's got some odd stuff.
He does. He's an odd dude. So we won't get into wrestling because we'll be here for like 3 hours talking about that. But that was one of those things that they built that over time. I remember, what was it? I think it was like issue 50 or something where they started going back and they started actually telling Snake Eyes' backstory, and we find out that he had an accident. That's why he can't speak any longer. It tells the story of when he went and trained.
That was not only essentially the origin of Snake Eyes, but it's also the origin of Cobra Commander.
It is,
and
yes.
It's also
because we find out that Cobra Commander is the person who killed the Hardmaster in order for and set up that
he put the hit
on him, which I thought was it Firefly? Is that who it was that killed him?
It was Zartan.
It was Zartan.
And that's how
that's
they were
right.
linked.
That's right. Yeah.
He was essentially out to get Snake Eyes,
right,
for blaming him for the downfall of his family. However, Cobra Commander was the one responsible. He was, if I remember correctly, he was a failed car salesman.
Yes, he was.
And had gotten behind the wheel, was intoxicated, hit the vehicle that was being driven by Snake Eyes' family.
Right.
Snake Eyes was the sole survivor. And, Cobra Commander got, in trouble.
Right.
Taxes and everything, and that's hence why he started
Cobra. Right.
He felt like the government had failed him, and then he blamed Snake Eyes' family for all that, and put the hit out when he found out where Snake Eyes was.
Mm-hmm. At the dojo, and
yes.
then Tommy saw it and thought that it was, or came in with Snake Eyes.
The crossbow was Snake Eyes' weapon of choice at the time, and that's why he thought he did it. Well, he ends up, cartoon and comic, this is where it starts to differentiate.
There's a lot of differentiation here.
But this is one of the biggest differentiates. In the comics, Snake Eyes Tommy was infiltrating Cobra,
right,
as a means to find who really did kill
the
Hard Master.
Right.
In the cartoon, he just straight up sided with Cobra.
Right.
So,
well, one of the biggest difference between the cartoon and the comic that I saw was the fact that in the comic book, Cobra Commander was not a bumbling idiot.
Correct.
He was actually a force to be reckoned with.
And he also was not a snake man.
No, he
Cobra
was
Law.
no.
I was going to say, it's before
Cobra
he turned
Law
into a
does
snake.
not exist. I'm sorry. That is so much bullshit, okay? That made me
Oh, you're a Serpentor fan. Don't even lie.
I do like Serpentor.
I am a Serpentor
I
fan.
do like, but I like the way they did Serpentor in the comic. I even like the way they originally did him in the cartoon. But I hate what happened with the whole Cobra Law thing somewhere down the line where it's like, oh, seriously, like, what the fuck? I mean, come on.
Michael, Michael, thank you so much, because now you've given me something to irritate Alan with moving forward. If he ever pisses me off, I'm just going to go Cobra, la 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 la.
Hey, I actually enjoyed some of the aspects of Cobra Law. I love the character of Nemesis Enforcer, but I felt like Nemesis Enforcer maybe would have been better suited not having the whole sci-fi type thing.
Right.
Maybe be a genetically engineered super soldier by Serpentor would have been awesome.
Something that was really interesting, with G.I. Joe being under the comic book being under the Marvel brand, is that there was that G.I. Joe Transformers.
Yes.
Because Marvel also had the license on Transformers. Here's the thing, though. With them crossing them over, that means that G.I. Joe exists in the actual Marvel Universe proper, because Spider-Man was in the first... like in the third issue of the original miniseries of the Transformers. So it's one of those things that there was always this plausible, like, well, maybe they'll show up in something, with Captain America or somebody, type stuff. So
and a lot of people forget this, there was an episode of Transformers where Cobra Commander appeared.
Yes.
He was not introduced as Cobra Commander. He was not referred to him and he was not wearing his helmet, but he was clearly wearing his suit underneath a trench coat and a hat covering up, as opposed to wearing the helmet.
Well, another crossover that most people don't remember is that there is a tie between G.I. Joe and the Inhumanoids, because Ace. Whatever I can't remember his real name off the top of my head, is a character in the Inhumanoids cartoon who is also one of the members of the Earth Corp, who was a pilot who was in an accident, and so his Earth Corps exoskeleton is the remains of the plane that he was in, and the character is the name that is Ace's real name. So
real quick,
there's also. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say a side note, and this is probably the same thing you were going to mention.
About the Geraldo Rivera guy that was in all of those cartoons.
They experimented with going with a larger scale toy.
Yes.
And they didn't want to do it with the G.I. Joe line, although it was an experiment to see if they could increase the size of the G.I. Joe line.
Okay.
And so they took that concept and they created Cops.
Oh, yeah,
there is a member of the Cops team who is if I remember correctly, is the grandson of Beachhead. And has the same last name.
Nice.
So it went unnoticed for a long time, and it wasn't until a convention, I want to say within the past 10 years, where somebody asked Larry Hama about it, and or one of the people behind the cartoon And they said, you know what? We're surprised it took this long for somebody to notice, but yes.
Nice.
That is a direct descendant of Beachhead, and that's why.
When they did the 25th anniversary 3 3/4 figures, there was a Matt Tracker.
I was just about to bring that
from
up.
Mask that they brought him in as a specialist. It was
specialist tracker,
right. And I was like, okay, cool. They're bringing this in. They've done that, and that was another thing with the cartoons with Inhumanoids and GI Joe and Jim and the Holograms.
Yes,
we were all made by Sunbow, all the same product. There was a character that appeared on all 3 of those shows. It was like a Geraldo Rivera type, daytime talk show dude that appeared on all of them. And of course, so it's like all of those are in the same universe. Apparently,
wasn't he voiced by?
I don't
Rivera?
know. I don't know who it was. He sounded just like him.
Just
I mean,
like
yeah, and it's
close.
of course you can look up there. I've got my Jim and the Holograms signed by the voice actors. You know
who does know. IMDb would know, so I'm
sure they
Rivera.
do. Yeah, but it's really cool to look at all that stuff. One of the other things, talking about that pulls some of this all together. I'm sure you've seen this recently, Michael. I don't know if you have, Barry. Reaction figures. They did that. They've done that line of like cartoon accurate figures for GI Joe.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the new ones they just released. It's radiated Snake Eyes with the old man that found him in the and he's also got the dog sled.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm like, I kind of want this. I don't want it for $75 though. That's kind of
So we've gone all around it, boys. Let's go ahead and talk about it.
Oh wait,
the live action movies.
Before we get to that, real quick, I wanted the comic books. So we said the comic books ended. What was it? Tracker was killed. Not was it? Or Stalker. Mm-hmm. Stalker was killed.
Stalker.
There were several people that died in the comic books, and it was really kind of interesting how like Cobra Commander was really angry about them being killed because he knew that the retribution was coming, and it was really kind of one of those like, wow.
I don't know if Stalker was one that was killed because Stalker was one appears again in the Devil's Due series.
Okay, I was going to get into the Devil's Due series that in 2001,
amazing run by the way.
It was. I remember picking it up. That was back when I got back into comics.
Yes.
What was really cool about that Devil's Due line or run was that it picked up 7 years after G.I. Joe had been decommissioned.
Yes.
They acknowledged that everything prior to that happened. And, even like, I know like, because like Bazooka had become they were pulling everybody together and Bazooka had become a security guy.
Yes.
And he was all out of shape and couldn't pass the he
was a reserve.
Yeah.
He was
and they went through a whole bunch of that stuff. And I thought it was really cool the way that they did that. And also the fact that like the Destro that was in that wasn't the original Destro, it was his son. And they really went through a lot of that really cool. And then they ended it. But then after they lost the license, IDW picked it up. And Larry Hama came back on, and they started with issue 156.
Yes.
It was a direct, this happens straight off of this. And
so no, July 2010.
Yeah, and so I thought that was pretty cool that they did that stuff.
My only issue with that, though, and although I loved it, but my issue with it was they took and they completely ignored everything that IDW had done, or not IDW, but Devil's Due had done with that previous title, and
which sucks. I
mean, they fleshed out characters that really weren't getting attention in the other line, whether it be the original Marvel run or the IDW.
Right.
One of my favorite characters, and actually a character that to me I would have to say is more so my favorite than Outback is Mercer. A very underrated character from the idea that, almost everybody that joins Cobra joined out of greed. Mm-hmm. They wanted money. Mercer did not join Cobra out of money. He joined because his mother had cancer. And Cobra Commander had offered him the means to pay for her treatment.
Okay, there you
so he signed up. Well, his mom, I cannot remember if either she passed away or she went into remission. Mm-hmm. At which point he was like, "Okay, well, I'm done. Yeah. There's no need for me to be here anymore. The whole reason I'm here is no longer there." So he defected, and he's the only, as far as characters go, he is the only member. Aside from Snake Eyes, or not Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, to defect from Cobra and live.
I want to touch on that real quick. When Storm Shadow became really popular, and they decided, okay, well, he's not a villain anymore. We're gonna say that they all kind of, and then they started the whole Ninja Force thing, and I was like, and here's where we're jumping the shark. It was like one ninja's fine, 1,000 ninjas is not so much.
Zartan with a pink mohawk.
I know. Yeah, but I remember that being in the Devil's Due run.
Yes,
when they brought Jinx back. And there was, I think it was Scarlet made a comment about, didn't we learn from that whole Ninja Force thing not to do that? Or it was one of those things where it was like, oh, I like what you're doing here. You're acknowledging that you went off the rails with it, So those are all really good comments. I know. Now let's get into the movies. All right.
Yeah, I was about to say we can't avoid these any longer. Let's go ahead and get them out of the way.
I will say this, and I maintained this for a long time. And Alan, I know you remember Bearded Jesus Reed from up at the old location of Escape. So when the original live action came out, Reed was like, man, I know you love G.I. Joe. You want to go see the movie? I was like, man, I swore I would never give my money a penny to this garbage that they're giving us. And he was like, well, I'll pay. So I was like, okay.
Well, there you go.
I get to maintain that I never spent money.
Fair.
Right.
And I went and saw it. And I wanted to give it a fair shake, but it was just such hot garbage.
It was.
I mean,
I remember when I heard that, like,
go ahead.
When I heard Ray Park was being cast as Snake Eyes,
right?
Okay. This has potential.
All right.
This has the potential for being something cool. And
why did his mask have lips on
was it flaming garbage?
I remember.
I maintain that I think Joel Schumacher in some way helped design the Snake Eyes suit, and I was surprised that there weren't nipples involved.
I remember seeing that first Super Bowl ad. Like when they were like, oh yeah, and like those exosuits that they were wearing when they were doing, and I was like, no, this is going to be terrible. I went and saw it, and I'll be honest, I didn't hate it initially. Like when I walked out of the theater, I was like, okay, it's got problems, but it's not terrible. As a couple of weeks went by and I thought about it more and more, I grew to hate that movie. Of like, and here's the other thing. You guys may have I caught it in the theater. Okay, that final battle that they do, was it there in the Antarctic or whatever? It's underwater, they're all in the blah, 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 blah. Almost like shot for shot, the same as the Death Star run at the end of Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
It's almost identical. And I'm sitting there going, they had to have done this on purpose.
I'm
they
surprised
had to have done
Lucas
this on purpose.
Did not call them out.
I could not believe how. Well, I was just like, you've got the sword battle going on. You've got them outside. You basically have X-wings and TIE fighters fighting underwater is basically what it comes down to.
Shadow falling down.
And I know it was just one of those things. I'm like, wow, they ripped G.I. Joe off. I mean, they ripped off Star Wars like crazy on this. But yeah, but I think the most egregious thing that they did was that final line of, you in what army?
I disagree.
Me in my army. It's like, oh shit, seriously, you really?
I disagree. There is one more. There is one truly egregious thing that they did in that first movie that pissed me off to no end.
Which was
one of the most beloved and appreciated characters from the cartoon.
Okay.
Was in that movie for 15 seconds. Gung Ho.
Yeah, as we're saying, Gung Ho. Yeah, he is. He
15 seconds.
They basically pass him.
And played by Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like, that's a perfect casting.
Yes.
And he literally drives up in a motorcycle, and that's it. And I'm like, how do you do that?
Well, and then we got the what was the second one?
So the second one, Retaliation.
Retaliation.
We talked about the fact that they tried to duplicate killing Duke.
Yes.
The idea was to kill off Duke,
right,
and replace him with Flint. And if an afterthought is the fact that Flint is in the character is in the movie, the second one. So they started doing test screenings after filming the movie entirely, and
which never goes well.
They did the test screenings at the same time that Magic Mike had come out in theaters.
Yes.
I think it had been out for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and they took the fact that when Duke is killed within, I want to say in the original cut, I think it was within the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That the majority of women in the audience got up and left, and so and that's just a rumor. That's
Right.
a rumor. It hasn't been verified, but
It wouldn't surprise me, especially coming off Magic Mike's.
But almost immediately they're like, hey, we've decided that we're going to go back and we're going to reshoot and some scenes and convert it to 3D.
Yes.
And it's used as the explanation of why the movie was delayed over a year. And I do buy the theory that it was because women didn't like the fact that, because it came out that they were adding and filming extra scenes with Channing Tatum.
Right.
And so...
And let's be honest, that first G.I. Joe movie did not give me any indication that Channing Tatum would be a thing at all. I was like, he was dull.
Yes.
He just, it was like, this is like the least,
It was
forced.
It was the least interesting character in the entire thing,
Agreed.
I didn't really care for Sienna Miller as Baroness, but I really liked whoever it was that played her in the Snake Eyes movie. I thought that was great.
I'm not going to lie. I have still not seen the Snake Eyes movie, and I probably
Neither
will
have
never.
I.
Let's put it this way. Of the 3 live-action G.I. Joe movies that have been made, it's the best one. That's a low bar, I know, okay?
I was about to say.
It is a real low bar, but it's actually pretty good. The biggest complaint I had with that movie, they changed the story a little bit because it is all about, Snake Eyes and Storm
Snake
Shadow, that kind of stuff. The biggest thing that they did that I didn't like, and it wasn't for the casting, they brought Scarlet into it. And it's Samara Weaving playing her, which I'm fine with, but she's got this horrible red wig that she's wearing, and it's just like, seriously, guys, you could have done so much better. I mean, this is, and she's in it for like 2 scenes. Literally, it's we're going to introduce this character here so we can bring her back later. And like, don't do that.
Yeah.
If you're going to introduce her and actually put her in this movie.
It was supposed to be a soft reboot, like how Bumblebee was for Transformers Universe.
And again, of the 3, it's the best. That's not saying a whole lot, though, unfortunately. So that's kind of where we sit right now with G.I. Joe. I know there's been a couple of cartoon reboots over the years.
Resolute was amazing.
I have not seen that one.
From a standpoint of wanting a more adult-themed G.I. Joe, it dealt very well with what was going on. I mean, Bazooka's killed right at the beginning. And they're trying to figure out why. And the movie, it takes place, Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, they're still at each other's throats.
Okay.
You get a little bit more backstory, a modernized version of Snake Eyes and how his origin and how he came to be. And, they don't do the whole, Snake Eyes was framed or whatnot.
Right.
Actually, I think they might have done that. And but in the fight, Storm Shadow was jealous that Snake Eyes was taught the final move by the Hard Master.
Oh yeah,
and as opposed to Snake Eye or Storm Shadow getting it
right.
And so that's where the whole thing.
They do that a little bit in the Snake Eyes movie. There's the Hard Master doesn't get killed. It's like I said, they changed the story. But there is that whole. Tommy's upset that you're teaching this person all this stuff. He's not of our bloodline. That kind of stuff. They start off as friends, and then there's this jealousy as Snake Eyes becomes better. That kind of stuff. And it's like, so that kind of bugged me. And I was like, no, you see, the Heartmaster has to die in order for this to.
Yes.
That's just canon. You can't get away from that. So.
Okay.
Like I said, the reaction figures that came out last year, 2 years ago, whenever it was, I've really liked the way that they've done those cartoon, and I go back to that because the cartoon, like I said, I've got this DVD that was released, I guess, almost 20 years ago, and that a lot was comfort food. At one time. But I also, as we're recording this, we're right here before Thanksgiving. I remember when I was a kid, the local, one of the UHF channels on Thanksgiving would show both of those back to back.
Yes.
Like for several years in a row. Channel
I remember
17.
watching
Yeah. And so that was kind of like, that became like my, I might catch part of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I was never really big on that kind of stuff. But the thing is starting around noon, that would start. And so I was like in front of the TV, I'm here for the next few hours, just like, so that I have very strong, ties for those original 2 miniseries and Thanksgiving. So yeah, I'm glad that we when Barry brought this up, I guess about a couple months back now, it was before we started our Oktoberfest stuff. I was like, no, we're going to do this, but we're going to do it right. Okay, this is
that's perfect timing.
And then of course I met you.
Got
talking. I was like, oh yeah, we need to bring you on the show for this. So that's
absolutely. All right. Well, I have one last little thing, here before we start to get out the door.
Are we going to sing the song? We're going to sing the song, aren't we?
No, I'm not going to sing the song. And I'm not going to go into all of the PSAs at the end of it, which were still.
Now we know. Knowing's
be honest, that was the best part of the cartoon.
It really was.
And the spoof that came out.
I tell you, a few years ago, I was last time that I worked in retail. I remember we were getting ready to open the store. I had all these young kids. I say kid, they were like in their early 20s or whatever, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. And something was said, and I was like, okay, and now we know. And what does G.I. Joe say about that? And they all gave me a blank stare. And I was just like,
damn it, I'm old.
Yeah, you guys don't know what in the hell I'm talking about. All right. So.
And yet if you looked at them and said pork chop sandwiches, they
probably
would know.
I know.
I'm getting a shirt made that just says pork chop sandwiches. I'm going to see if anybody gets what it what it means.
And that was a thing like in the early YouTube. Those things became that became
they were viral before viral was
exactly.
viral.
So. All right, Barry, go ahead with your quiz.
I got a little quiz for you guys. Initially, it was going to be 10 questions. It's now down to 5 because you bastards answered them as you went through the episode.
Damn.
So
that's what happens.
What we're going to do is trade off back and forth on this, and I've got one as a tiebreaker. I'm just curious to see how well you guys know your shit. All right? We'll start with Michael. Michael, you ready for this?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Officially, how many points of articulation did the original G.I. Joe America's Movable Fighting Man have? Officially.
So are we talking about the 60s G.I. Joe, or are we talking about the 80s G.I. Joe?
The 12 inch.
Oh, okay.
12 inch. He didn't know there was going to be a quiz today.
No, I didn't. And I'll be perfectly honest. I am not as well versed in the 12-inch Joes as I am in the 3 3/4.
I have a guess.
Okay.
I'm wanting to say. Let's see.
We'll play closest to the pin.
Yeah. 4.
I'm going to go with 5.
21.
Wow. Did the fingers move or something? I mean, this is.
It didn't list all.
I guess.
Of them,
the wrists,
the wrist,
shoulders,
elbows,
the wrist, the
neck,
elbows, and
knees, ankles.
Okay,
yeah,
shoulders, knees, and toes.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, Alan.
Yeah.
What facial characteristic did the original G.I. Joe have that made it able to be trademarked by Hasbro, since they could not trademark the human figure itself?
These are from the 60s versions.
A person. Yeah.
What did he have a scar on his face? It was a scar.
It was a scar.
It was a scar. Okay, yeah. I thought it was something.
All right.
Yeah.
Dang.
Michael.
Got to come from behind.
All right. According to the licensing agreement. All right, you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
According to the licensing agreement from Kendall Worlds, the character Snake Eyes shall never be depicted or described as a fan of what professional sports team?
I'm just going to say the Yankees because I hate the Yankees.
Yes, it is the Yankees.
That was a lucky guess.
Anyone who's not a Yankees fan hates the Yankees, so it's
Hasbro
that would have been my guess also.
Yes, yeah, Paul Tuckett to be specific.
Rhode Island, which is Red Sox country.
Yes,
so that's and they make mention of the cutter wearing the Red Sox hat.
Paul Tuckett, Red Sox minor league baseball team. Yes,
Alan.
Yes.
As you mentioned, things got a little weird towards the end. Mm-hmm. Which of these was not an actual figure in G.I. Joe?
Oh, God.
All right?
Okay.
Ice Cream Soldier, Armor Bot, Blitzkrieg, Captain Gridiron, or Extreme Lieutenant Stone?
None of those would surprise me in the slightest. Okay,
What
you
surprised
said
me is
ice.
only one of those.
You said Ice Cream Soldier,
Ice Cream
Extreme
Soldier, Armorbot,
Blitzkrieg,
Captain Gridiron, and Extreme Lieutenant Stone.
I'm gonna go with Blitzkrieg.
That is correct.
All right. So I remember Ice Cream Soldier.
Actually, can I just a little bit? That was actually a 2-part answer.
Okay.
Stone was a member of G.I. Joe Extreme,
right.
not a part of the 3 3/4 line.
Well, I just said a figure.
A figure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey.
So
Fair enough.
all right. Michael, I saved the last one for you because this
Okay.
one just cracked me up when I did the list.
This is for the tie. Here we go.
This is. We're going to go all bets on this one.
Okay.
Which of these men did not have a G.I. Joe figure made in their image?
Yeah, I got this already.
Do you now?
Yes.
William Perry, Theodore Roosevelt, Bob Hope, Stephen King, or Rowdy Roddy Piper?
I'm
I'm glad
King.
I'm not doing this one.
Stephen King.
What's your answer?
Stephen King.
It is Stephen King.
There you go.
But his son Owen
Yes.
did have one.
His
His name's Sneak Peek.
I got one for you.
Oh, here we go.
Oh God.
Yeah.
All right.
Where is the origin, or not necessarily where? Let me think real quick how to word this. Who was the original celebrity G.I. Joe supposed to be?
And
Why did they not?
It was supposed to be. I just heard something about this recently. And I'm trying to remember. Was it Schwarzenegger?
No.
Okay.
Close.
Stallone?
Oh, it was Stallone. It was that Rocky Balboa
Yes.
character that is actually
yeah.
He's actually in the Order of Battle. Like they have
And
him like
it did have the figure
right,
made.
right.
Now, why was he not?
They couldn't get the licensing or something, wasn't it?
I was gonna
He
say, I'm guessing
signed
licensing.
a likeness agreement with Remco for the Rambo toy line for the
yeah.
movie, and therefore
Couldn't be in
voided any figure being made in his likeness.
I remember that because in the Order of Battle where they're going with, it's basically all the cards, like the file cards.
Yes.
And there is, I think it's in the first issue, it's showing the Rocky Balboa character. And then in either the second or the third one, there is a retraction written into the comic saying there never has been a character of Rocky Balboa and there will never be, or something like that. So it was just like, wow, that's kind
as
of
a
weird.
form of retaliation and to show their disdain for what happened, that Hasbro felt like Stallone knew what he was doing when he signed his likeness rights.
Oh yeah.
So they went ahead and still put out the figure. All they did was add a different head sculpt.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why they came out with the character Big Boa, who was Cobra's trainer.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And why he came with boxing gloves.
And
he came with the
he had
heavy
a
bag.
snake, right?
No, he came with a heavy bag.
It was a heavy bag. Okay.
Punching bag.
That's right.
And it led to them signing Sergeant Slaughter to be the G.I. Joe trainer. And that's why it went from there.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. You had the Sergeant Slaughter because originally he was a mail away figure. That's the only way you could get him. You had to get 2 per purchase, and you had to call a hotline to get a code or whatever. It cost 50 cents or something.
If you were Canadian, you had to answer a simple math problem.
I don't remember what it was. It was that's been a long time ago since I did that, man. I killed a lot of brain cells between then and now. Okay?
I think the answer was like 1985 or something like that was the answer.
But then they released him later with he came with a vehicle.
The Triple T.
Yeah, and that was kind of the way. And it was funny because his little his baton that he had with the original didn't come with the second one, so that's the only way you can get it. And then of course they did the refrigerator Perry.
Nightstick.
Yeah. Then they did the refrigerator Perry was a mail away, and there was another one. Who was it? That was a celebrity that was involved in that. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I'm.
So the Piper figure wasn't a mail away; it was a convention exclusive figure.
Yes.
And he was what subgroup was he a member of?
I don't know that. I remembered hearing that there was one.
He was
but
a
I
member
didn't know.
of the Iron Grenadiers.
Okay.
So he was a part of Destro's organization.
That makes perfect sense for Roddy Piper. I mean,
As far as celebrity Joes, and the only ones with official with official likenesses and names, and their names matching their likeness, it was the Fridge and Slaughter, and then of course Piper, but later on.
Right.
Now here's one for you.
And
go for it. Go, Barry.
I was just going to say, when they brought back the 12-inch ones, that's when you started seeing a lot more.
Yeah, I like the Theodore Roosevelt. I remember when they did that.
Had one, a bunch of presidents
I think
had one.
Eisenhower had one.
Teddy Roosevelt had one.
Yeah,
Eisenhower did have one.
Yeah, usually the guys that were military got one.
Who was the only G.I. Joe character to have their home state be Tennessee?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I want to say I remember this.
That's a good question. I don't know. Honestly, that's
it was Memphis, wasn't it? It was from Memphis.
I want to say I think it's either Knoxville or Chattanooga.
Okay.
Oh,
who was it?
Wait a minute. Was it Rock and Roll?
No.
Okay.
Was it Roadblock?
I will give you a hint.
What Roadblock?
Okay.
Came out in 86, 87.
So it's one of the later, like the middle. I'm trying to remember from the cartoon if anybody had a Southern accent.
Was not featured in the cartoon.
Oh, okay.
Only in the toys.
Was it Joe or was it Cobra?
Joe's.
It's a Joe. Okay.
The only member of the Joe team, toy-wise.
You got me. I have no idea.
I don't know.
Quick Draw.
Okay.
Quick. Oh, God.
It was Knoxville.
Yes.
It was Knoxville.
Yeah,
and I actually say that because I remember reading that on the file card and being like, oh, wow, they're from Tennessee. Because at that time, you didn't get a whole lot of Tennessee representation.
Stephen King's son, if I remember correctly, was Crazy Legs.
Okay. See, I didn't realize that they had done likenesses for some of those. So that's kind of cool.
Who actually designed G.I. Joe toys, the figures themselves, like the characters? It was not Larry Hama. All Larry Hama did was write the bios.
DeFalco? Wasn't Tom DeFalco? I
have a buddy of mine who is really good friends with this man, and he absolutely does not like being thanked for it. So once I tell you the name, if you ever see him at a convention or whatnot, don't thank him.
All right, I don't know. I have to.
Ron Rudat.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Oh, well, wow. It's kind of like you get into another interesting thing in that when you go and look at the Masters of the Universe stuff.
Yes,
Paul Dini. Mm-hmm. Basically wrote all the bios on all the characters. He was working not only with Mattel but also with whoever the company that made the cartoon. It wasn't Sunbow, whoever it was, but he was the one that basically wrote the bios for all of that stuff in the beginning. And of course, he goes on to Batman and
you could thank Masters of the Universe for giving us Power Rangers.
And I'm not going to thank anybody for that.
So
it's
Shuki Levy and Haim Saban wrote the song, the theme song for Masters.
There's one person I really want to thank here. I just, as we're kind of wrapping up here, Michael, thank you so much for joining us on this. You have brought a ton.
That's Barry's way of saying let's cut this short. So
well, I would definitely.
Well, actually, I want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything you want to shout out?
Really.
Any kind of announcements you want to give?
Well, nothing really. Just
come see you at the Great Escape Madison.
Keep living the dream, man.
Yes,
and I would definitely love to come back and do this again. And
we'd love
like
to
we
have
were
you.
discussing
Absolutely.
before we went on this, I'm looking at starting up my own podcasts, and I would definitely love to have you guys on as guests sometime.
Absolutely. Hey, we were all about some cross promotion on
nice.
Because Barry's got a wrestling podcast that's coming out here before long, and
yes, with a friend of the show, George.
Yeah, George from
Gen X
Grown Up, and who we had on the show back in May. I can't believe it's been that long, man. It's been a slog.
Dave's crush.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. But yeah. Also, this is our last episode of November. Just the week after Thanksgiving is when this is coming out, and we're going to be taking a short break through the holidays. It won't be complete. I've got a couple of things I'll drop in for mini episodes, but we will be back in January because 2022 wound up being a lot more. We invested in 2022 a lot more than we meant to, and a lot of that is my fault because I made executive decisions on air that I had to live
Still
with.
come back to bite you in the ass.
And so it really has been a long year, both for the podcast as well as personally. And so we just decided as a group that we're going to take a little break through the holidays. And we want to say thank you to everyone for being with us through all of this, all of our new listeners.
Absolutely.
And as well as the ones that have been with us for a long time. And we hope that everybody has a wonderful holiday season. Spend as much time as you can with your family. And just enjoy being with the ones that you love. Yes, absolutely do. I mean, Michael talked about lost his dad earlier this year. I lost my mom, just recently. I know Amy lost her grandfather, back during the summer, and Barry and I, as well as a bunch of other people, lost a really dear friend back in the end of September that we haven't really talked about. And we've discussed talking on here, but I'll be honest, I'm not ready for it yet. And so it's just, it's been one of those years. Yeah, exactly. And it's just kind of been one of those years. And so we just, from all of us here at Gen X Grown Up, wow. All of us here from the Project Gen X podcast want to say, have a wonderful holiday season. Hug your family, and spend the time with the people you love. And we will be back. Our
Discord channel is still going to be up and running.
Dude, we will still do all that. All of that again.
And I would encourage.
Go ahead.
I would encourage all of our listeners to jump on Discord if you haven't already. In fact, we introduced a new channel on Discord a couple of weeks back to give you guys the opportunity to submit episode ideas over to us.
Yes.
So
yes,
if there's something
absolutely.
that you guys would like to hear us talk about, some topic that's burning a hole in your brain, and you just want to hear three idiots go on about it for about an hour or so, by all means, shoot it on there. We will be happy to take a look.
And we most definitely qualify as three idiots. Too.
Absolutely. Yes.
Some of us more than others, and it's just like I said, all of our. And you'll also notice. When you go and look at the notes that we have a Twitter account again, since things have gotten interesting over there. We had one way back in the day, and things just got too. Nobody was maintaining it, and now I'm just like, all right, you know what? Everybody still seems to be on Twitter as the go-to, so that's just all right, fine. But our Discord,
except their employees,
yeah, well, the Discord is definitely the place to interact with us. On a one-to-one basis.
We spend a lot of time on there. I know Dave has been adding a lot more back to the Facebook page, and trying to.
I've been done with Facebook since back in the first of the year, so.
But yeah, definitely reach out to us on Discord. Keep us in the loop on what's going on with you guys. Tell us how you like the show. Give us feedback on this. If you have GI Joe memories that you want to share, if you have your favorite characters you want to talk about, if you have some of your favorite toys, or if you just didn't quite understand what all the hype was about, trust me, we'll be happy to tell you.
Which brings us to
feel free to burn all DJ toys.
Well, as you were saying, it brings us to Michael. You need to get on Discord, so if you're not already, because that's a lot of fun over there.
I am not. I'll definitely have to try it.
It's definitely great because it really is one of those things where we've built a really nice community of people that will talk about the podcast as well as all kinds of other stuff, and they're all across the United States, and so it's like, all right, cool, and everybody just interacting and everything. So, no pressure. Actually, there's a lot of pressure. Peer pressure.
Yeah.
So guys,
I'm a 6 foot tall midget. I don't have a hard time with pressure.
All right, fair enough. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I am Alan Smith.
I am Barry, and on behalf of Big Dave.
Yeah, and I know, and Dave sat this one out because he does not have the love for G.I. Joe the way we did, so go and bug him on Discord about that and tell him how wrong he is.
Please harass him on Discord.
We want to thank Michael for coming out today and recording with us, and I'm sure we will have you back on at some point. Go visit him at the Great Escape Madison, and just go visit Great Escape or whatever your local comic book / cool stuff
retro
retailer
store.
is. Yeah.
Come enjoy my rants on random stuff.
There you go. That's God. How many times have I gone in there and we've just talked for an hour, about whatever.
Might catch me beating up a shoplifter.
There you go. Yeah, you got that. You got that too. So, guys, have a great holiday season. I cannot talk. Have a great holiday season. Holiday, not Halloween. Have a great holiday season. We will see you in 2023. And hey, guys. We really and truly heartfelt. We love you guys, and thanks for being here with us. So we will see you next time.
Is your mom there?
No, I'm home alone.
Well, you won a prize. What's your address?
42 Oak Street. Hey, Roblox, some stranger's bringing me a prize.
A stranger, huh? All he wanted to bring you was trouble. Remember, never tell anyone you're home alone, and never give anyone your address.
I'll say Mom can't come to the phone.
Smart thinking.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!